Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again for joining the next part of the Gridfox webinar series. Just to confirm the ground rules, we have the chat box turned off, but you can still engage, and we encourage you to do that using the question and answer section. So I'll try and do these live as I'm going along, but if that doesn't work out, then I'll certainly cover everything that's asked at the end of the session. So by way of introduction, my name is Craig Nathan Moss, and I am Head of Engagement here at Gridfox. And my role is really to work with our end users to understand what do they like, what can we improve on, any features that we could potentially look to build, and really be the voice of the customer when working with our product team. And I'll be going through the training session today as well. So we're on number 4 of this 5-part series, and today we're going to look at workflows and permissions. Now, if you've missed any of the previous webinars, you can catch up with them on our website. All you've got to do is go to gridfox.com and you'll see a little tab across the top that says webinars, and all those previous recordings are on there. Now, for today's session, I've actually had a slight change of plan. So instead of going workflows and permissions, I'm going to start off with permissions because I think it'll make more sense covering it in that way. So a couple of things to note on how we've got this set up. First of all, we have 2 very simple tables. One's projects and one's tasks. I know that this is kind of my go-to when I'm demonstrating things, but I've tried to make it a bit more realistic to my life, actually. So you can see the data is, what do I have to do at home? So we've got build a tree house, clean the house, prepare the school clothes. So in these projects, we have a list of tasks, and they are allocated to either myself or my wife, Mandy. And you can see those being filtered down the left-hand side as well. Now, because we're doing permissions, it means that what Mandy can do and see is going to change over time. And because of that, I have also opened up on another tab the same actual project. So at the moment, you can see Mandy's screen. I click back, you can see my screen. So let's get going. And the first place to look at is the users at the top here. And you'll see at the moment that me and Mandy are both sat in that project admin box. And what that means is Mandy can do everything that I can do. So to go into her project, she can change records, she can delete them, she can add records by clicking new. She can also go into the Explorer and change the setup of this project. So she can delete things, add new ones, or rename whatever she needs to do. And to get people going and how you invite people is by clicking this big blue button. And when I do that, it's allowing me to enter an email address. So let me put one in here as an example. And when I send that, you'll see it gives me 3 different options on how to set them as a default. So we'll put this person in project admin for now. So they have the same rights and capabilities as me and Mandy. But I want to now talk about the other ones. So we have edit and we have view. Now, if I move Mandy down to the edit category and go back into her profile, one thing you do need to know is that the user will have to log out and back in again if you change any of these permission settings. So now I've done that for Mandy. We can see some changes. So just to refresh, we've moved her from project admin into edit. And if I go back to my project to compare, in projects, if you're a project admin, you can see all these top buttons, the automate, the users, the explore. Now I've moved Mandy to edit only, those buttons are no longer there. So what that means is she cannot change the fundamentals of this project. What she can do, however, is work with all the records. So she can click into, for example, build a treehouse. She can change the name of it, and any of these fields she can amend. She can even delete the record, or she could carry on adding new records if required. So in summary, if you have allowed someone to be an edit-only user, they can work with records, but not the fundamentals and the setup of that actual project. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move her down again. So let's put her in view only and see what impact that has on what Mandy can do. And the name kind of gives it away. When you're in view only mode, you can just see things, but you can't actually do anything. So you'll notice that new and import have been grayed out now because she can't do that. You'll notice that when I try to actually amend text, it won't let me. She can literally just see records, but she can't do anything else to them whatsoever. And that's the same with tasks as well. So she's locked from doing anything. Now, those are kind of the default settings that you can put different users into. We class them as those 3 default buckets, but you can get even more granular than that. You can restrict things even further if you wanted to. And to do that, you would need to create a new group on the right-hand side. So when I add group, we'll just call this sales, for example. And I'm going to drop both Mandy in there and this Todd Copper that I've just created as well. And in fact, before I show you how this operates, let me just put one of these records into Todd's name as well, just so that you can see how this functions. Okay, so we have now this sales group, and I can configure their permissions by clicking on this button here. And when I do that, what you can see is it's brought up 2 different lines. Now, these lines represent my actual tables. So I've got the projects and I've got the tasks. And you'll see here how I can restrict them for this group. So this, whatever I do here will apply to both Mandy and Todd Copper. So if, for example, I want somebody to be able to work with tasks, I want them to be able to read, create, edit, and delete tasks, I can tick all these boxes. You'll notice how I haven't ticked any on projects. And what that means is, if I go back into Mandy's profile and log her out again, what that means is she will only be able to see and work with tasks. Projects are hidden completely. She can't see them. If she clicks into a task, she can see the related project, but she cannot actually click into it because it's hidden from her. It's a hidden field. So we've restricted one table in that scenario. Let's bring them both back in again. The next button along, pretty self-explanatory, can import/export. So you can restrict the capabilities of your users on whether they are allowed to bring in data or export data as well. Now, moving along even further, we have these restricted fields. Let's work with tasks. And if I click manage, it's basically allowing you from the drop down to choose which field you want to restrict. So I'm going to restrict due date because I know what my wife's like and I don't want her changing that due date, because if she's got jobs in her name and she's not doing them, I need to hold her to account. So when I click that, you'll see this little padlock appear. This is one of the options we have when we've selected due date. I'm going to save that right now. I'm going to go back into tasks for Mandy. So just to remind you, the due date, which is on tasks, so this field here, we have now put a padlock against Mandy. What that means from her perspective is that she cannot change that date. So everything else is free and open for her to start amending, but she cannot move this due date. So when I click in the record, you'll see how I just can't do anything here. Start date still is available to her. The name is, everything else she can change. It's just that due date that we've locked from her. Now, the other thing that we can do in that same area is we can change that padlock to an I with a cross in it. And there's kind of no prizes for guessing what this is going to do, but I'm going to show you anyway. It's basically going to stop Mandy seeing the due date. So in tasks now, it's just not there for her. She can't see it at all. So we've restricted that individual field. And like I said before, that will work for both Todd and herself, who are sat in that group. So just to refresh, we have two different levels of being able to restrict fields. You select one from the drop-down and you can change it to either lock it, which means they can read only, or you can restrict them from seeing it altogether. And obviously you can do things like that for each table, and you can add multiple things in here. You know, it doesn't have to be just one field. You can actually add a few if that's what you were trying to achieve. So let's just get rid of this due date for now. And obviously you can do the same for projects as well, but we're now going to look at record filters. If I click on that, this only gives me two options. So this only allows me to filter by the owner and created by. So that would be who is the task owner for this record and who actually created this record. I'm going to use owner for this example because created by would all be me, and that wouldn't be very good to demonstrate. This time we're going to have four different options on this. So the first is we've got a padlock and an individual. Okay, let's save that, because now from Mandy's perspective, when she logs in into the tasks area, she's going to see this. She's going to see all the records from everybody attached to this project. However, any records that don't belong to her, such as myself, she can do nothing with. They are view only. And the same with Todd Copper at the bottom. It's a view only record. However, her own records, she can carry on editing, deleting, adding, and doing what she needs to do in those. So to refresh, what we have right here with the padlock owner and an individual is the ability to just amend your own records, but you can still see everybody else's. If I click this padlock and change it to that, which is the eye with a cross through it again, and now log back in, it's going to change things again. Because this time, Mandy can only see her own tasks, nothing else. And if I click Craig, because you'll see there's some filters here, she still can't see anything. All she can see are her own tasks. And she can still edit them and do what she wants, but she has no visibility over anything else. If I go back in here and I change this little eye back to the padlock for now and click on the type, you'll see two people appear. And this is trying to represent the fact that it's showing a group. So this is now anybody in the sales group, i.e. Mandy and Todd. So to refresh what we've got, we have got a lock on the group. When I come back in here, what that means is, if I go to tasks, Mandy can now edit every one of her own records, but she can also edit everyone's records who are based in the sales group. So she can change Todd Copper's information. She cannot change my information because I am not in the group. So she's restricted to just those members that are based within sales. If I change that again to view only, you may have guessed what's going to happen again, but it's going to restrict her even further to only be able to actually see records of the people in her group, i.e. her and Todd. And she can amend those still again, but she basically cannot see anything belonging to people outside of that sales group. And I think that is everything around permissions. So I've tried to purposely talk through that slowly because I know that it can be a little confusing, but hopefully from demonstrating it from the other side in Mandy's record, it's really started to make sense on what you can and can't do with those permissions. And the bottom line is you can pretty much bespoke it to do whatever you need, depending on your requirements. Okay, let me just have a quick scan through. It looks like there's a couple of questions here based on permissions. So I'm going to answer them now whilst it's still hot in your mind. Number one, what do the 3 dots do to the right of a user? So that would be these dots here, and you can see the same on me. It just allows you to either change their group or to delete them all together. So when I click change, it's exactly the same thing effectively as dragging and dropping, which you saw me do for these 3 dots at the side, just a different method of doing that. And obviously delete means that that user will disappear as well. And it's the same for even the project admin. And the other one is, can you allow editing of a record, but not allow creation? So I'm guessing if I go to configure permissions here, you'll see how you've got read, edit, click, etc., etc. Now these work in order. So for example, if I click read, I have to go up in order. I can't click delete and have these 2 unselected. So the answer is no, but we've kind of done that for a specific reason, in that they're kind of progressive levels of authority. So they can read records, now they can create new records, now they can edit records, and we can't think of a user case where you'd need to be able to edit something but not create it, because if you got a record, you could just change it anyway. And the final step is they can delete things as well. So you can individually select these, but they do work in an order that kind of makes sense from a user perspective. Okay, I think that is it for workflow questions. So let me now move on to the automations. Okay, now automations is basically saying, do you want to set up a workflow that is automated? And so examples of this are, if you have people doing things within the project that you don't have instant visibility of, do you want to be made aware of that through an email? So let's get some built, and that'll help explain it in more detail. So first of all, it's saying, which table do you want to work from? Well, I'll work from task, and we'll just call this, we'll work down these lists, we'll call this new record. Now to set this up, it needs to have a trigger. So what is going to make this automation begin? And there's 4 options for those, which we'll come to more independently. Once we've got those triggers, do you want a condition? So is there a filter in there that says, if the triggers happened, only carry on if this certain criteria has been met? And if it has, then send the email. So let's go through this. So what I'm saying is, every time a new task is created, I then want to send an email to myself. And the subject of that can be new task. And you can put any sort of narrative in here that you want. And then you can decide what columns you want to show in the table that is ultimately sent through. Okay, so I'm going to apply this. I'm going to go back to my project and I'm going to create a new task. Let's just call it demo. It doesn't really matter about its information. I just want you to see how it then appears in my inbox. And you will notice that there's probably a short delay in this. I'll open my inbox up and I will just wait for that to now pop up and you'll see it arrive. So that's the basic one of how to do that. Now the triggers are very different. You can have it as a create record, so every time a record is created. You can have it every time a record is updated. So if, for example, a task moves from backlog to in progress or in progress to complete, you can be made aware of that by the email. The other option is delete record. So you could have it progress to here. Every time a record is deleted, then an email is sent. Or you can schedule it. Sorry, let me just get rid of this 1 second so I can demonstrate these a bit more efficiently. And I think that email just comes through as well. So let's just have a quick check at that. And that is now saying you have this new task demo, and these are the details around it as well. So that's the automation that will send you that email that clarifies what's happening, even if you're not there to see yourself. Now then, tasks. We can delete records. So that's basically saying every time a record's deleted, make me aware. And we can schedule records as well to say, do you know, I don't want to know about every single thing that's being updated. But what I do want to know is on, for example, a daily basis, at 7 a.m. in the morning, I want to get an email that tells me about everything. So that will be a list of all the tasks, you'll be able to see their statuses, and you'll be able to know what's changed. Now, the other thing that we can fit in is these filters. So if we're using this, we can basically say, do you know, I actually only want to see the records of Mandy. I don't care about my own because I know what I'm doing. And I want to send that email through to myself, and the same thing applies as what you've just seen. I just populate all these details to give that example. Now, if I was to change some of these, so let's just get rid of these for 1 second. If I was to amend this to an update record, it would give me different options if I put the filter in there. Because now it's saying, well, what do you want to be made aware of? So you can set it to say, I want to receive an email only if a project has been completed. And that will now send me something through every time that's been done. So I know how we're tracking. Now, the final thing I wanted to talk about on workflows is the email. Because you can set it up by users and groups that you can see here. So I could send it to individuals. I could send it to those groups that we've set up. So sales, for example, it'll go through to everyone in that group. Or similar to what we saw with permissions, we can do it by user or group field. So that means if, for example, a task is completed and my name's attached to it, I will receive an email that tells me that. Now, that's not always necessarily the same as me completing it, because it might be, actually, I've got a lot on and I want to say to somebody else, can you please just pick this up for me? When it's completed, I will have visibility of that because the email will be sent through. And the same thing can be said of group. So what that will basically do is every time the task is completed, it will send an email to everybody in the same group as the person that owns that task. So just to explain that in a different way, if, for example, a task is completed by me and it's in Mandy's name, that automation will send it out to everybody in sales to say the task has been completed. So that is the task.owner group. Okay, so I hope that makes sense for now. There are no outstanding questions at this stage, so I'm going to move on to the next part of the demo, and that is we're going to look at, in settings, something called Multifactor Authentication. Now I'm going to really strip back to the basics on this, and forgive me if I'm teaching some of you how to suck eggs, but I just think it's fair to give this understanding for everybody in the group. Multi-factor authentication is another security layer on top of when you log in, having to put in your email address and your password. And it's common outside of Gridfox, there are loads and loads of applications that use this. And the concept behind it is, depending what device you're on, it will look slightly different. I'm on a Google Pixel, so I have an app called Google Authenticator. And in that app, I have Gridfox set up. It's dead easy to do. All you need to do is when you click manage and enable, you just have to open the app and scan this, and that is literally it. Now, what happens when you do that is it will then generate a 6-digit code. And that 6-digit code changes every 30 seconds. So if you enable this, it will mean that when you next log in to Gridfox, it'll ask you for your email and your password. And once you've completed those, it will also ask you for this 6-digit code. And all you need to do is check in the app, copy the numbers across, and it will let you in. It's as simple as that. Now, there are 2 ways that you can set up this MFA. The first is on your profile. And what that means is every time you, as an individual user, log into Gridfox, you will need to put that 6-digit code in. The other way that you can do it is you can add it to your account. Now, what that means is if you add MFA here, it's the same concept with the numbers, but anybody that you're sharing your project with will also need MFA in order to access that project. So for example, these are all the users I have in all my projects. So for example, Todd Copper that we've just set up now, if I set this up, Todd Copper would be required to enter MFA if he wanted to access this project. Okay, so that is the end of MFA. We've got one other thing that I want to cover. And if I go back to projects and my webinar, it is exporting and importing data. This is a really useful feature because we don't want people reinventing the wheel. If you've been using Excel spreadsheets historically and you've got loads and loads of data on there, we absolutely do not expect you to copy it all across because that would take forever. You can import before you export, but I'd advise against it. And here's the reasons why. When you're coming to import data, you need to make sure that all these top columns match verbatim. So capital letters could throw it out. If you had a small n there on your other spreadsheet, it wouldn't like it. Spaces in between words or afterwards would throw it out. And it can be quite frustrating trying to understand why it isn't working. So what I do is I would export this. Doesn't matter if there's no records in, as long as it's got these top titles. Once I've got this here, I know exactly not to change these because they're the ones that's going to be read. Now, if I have another spreadsheet with information on, I would then just copy it across to here and it would work in the same way. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm just going to put some numbers in, and so you'll see how this actually works. I'm literally going to copy everything from this next line and put it in. So when I save this and import it back in, you will see that my current records will remain untouched, and you will now see 4 new records. So task Gridfox export, come to import, and let's just go to my recent downloads because I'm pretty sure it'll be there. Here it is. Once I import it back in, you can see loads of green ticks and it's saying your data is now ready for import. It's found no errors. Click import in there and you'll see that it's brought those in underneath my other records. So it's dead easy to do. If there are any problems when trying to import it, then they will be shown on that little preview screen that you saw. And it can be things such as, okay, let's do one. Let's do one as a prime example. If I now try and import this again, but this time I'm going to use a different status that doesn't exist. So maybe I'll just put, oops, get into the right box. Let's just put cheese in here. I can't remember what statuses I have, but I'm pretty sure that cheese doesn't exist. Now, if I come back and try and import it, it tells you the problem. Row 15, which is here, row value must be a valid value for the list. So I know my list field is status. It's telling me this is not legitimate. It's even shading it in a deeper red. So I know that I have to change that before importing the data. So that's how that works. Like I said, it's very, very simple if you export first and have these top titles. It can become a little more tricky if you're trying to import from a fresh spreadsheet because these need to match exactly. And that comes to the end of everything that I wanted to show. So we do have some more questions. I'll run through those now. And if you think of anything else that you want or you'd like me to demonstrate again, then please raise it in the Q&A box right now. Okay. Can you bulk upload and invite users? No, unfortunately not. So what this person's asking is, on here, can you bulk upload? Because it may be, I know there's some people that we work with already that have like 100 people using Gridfox. And it's, again, quite monotonous to invite all of those people. So can you add multiple users? The answer is no. However, there is an item in our backlog to be able to do that. In all honesty, it isn't high up the priority list because it hasn't been requested that many times. But as always, the more it is requested, the higher priority it will get. So if anybody else is feeling that pain, then please feel free to voice it on the community and we can look at bumping it up the list. Next question. If you schedule a workflow, what time zone does the hour apply to? Great question. And I think this was covered in a previous webinar where I basically advised that the time is set based on your device's criteria. So I'm based in the UK, it's 11:33 over here, as you can see. If you're based in the East Coast of America, it's going to be 6:33 in the morning. It's going to work relevant to whatever your system settings say. So if you're in the US and it's 6:33 and you set this to remind you at 9 a.m. every morning, it will come through at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Okay, next up, can you import data into a filter? So I think what that's basically asking is, these filters down the left-hand side, I have Craig and Mandy. Can I bring import data that fits them straight in here? And the answer to that is no. Remember, these are not tables. These are just filtering the data from your task list. However, what you will notice is when I import them into my task list, as I've done with this 1, 2, 3, and 45, it is automatically in my filter. And the reason being is my filter is set up to filter by owner. So because they were tagged in my name, you can see them in this filter anyway. They're not going to show Mandy's because they weren't tagged to her. So technically you can import straight into a filter. However, any information you do put in your tasks will automatically filter into here. You will have to refresh the filter, so to speak. Okay, we've got one more question coming in. Can you import data from elsewhere, such as Microsoft Outlook? The answer to this is yes and no. So we require a spreadsheet or a Google Doc in order to import data. If you've got data on Microsoft Outlook, and I'm going to assume it's something like contacts, because you can create contacts on Microsoft Outlook, I do know there is a way to export the data from MS Outlook into Excel. I don't think it's particularly easy, but I do know it exists. Ultimately, to import into Gridfox, you need to get your data into an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc. So regardless of the system you're on, it could be Outlook, it could be, I don't know, Slack, it could be whatever it is that you utilize. As long as you can get that information out into a spreadsheet, then the answer is yes, you can import it straight into Gridfox from that point. Okay, well, thank you so much for your engagement. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to write any more questions in there. And whilst I do that, I'm just going to remind you of one more thing, and that is that if you are not a user of Gridfox, you can absolutely trial it for free for 14 days. Just go to our website, gridfox.com, and you'll see a little try for free at the top right of the screen. We can also have a single one-to-one session to help you build what you need. So we've kind of launched this as our concierge service. And what that means is it's totally free. If you like the idea of Gridfox, but just can't work out how to get going, then I will sit through a session with you and help you build that. And it might be that you just want to throw some ideas around about what could happen. It might be that you want me to build it for you. And reluctantly, I will do that. The reason I say reluctantly is I really want our users to learn how to use the software themselves, because it can be so much more powerful if they understand the fundamentals. That said, to get people going, I will absolutely assist, because I know with any software, it can be quite daunting at that first time. And alternatively, if there's any questions at all, please feel free to email me at this email address. And I'll come back to everyone in due course. There are no more questions that have come through. So once again, just want to thank you for your time and your engagement, and hopefully we'll get to work with you all at some point in the future. Thank you.